So I'm going to be talking about synesthesia. So the first thing I need to look at is what is synesthesia? And it's the occurrence of imagery in one sense modality in response to sensations in another. And it's a stimulus that produces an additional or conceptual response to the normal response. There are many types of synesthetic experiences, but all consist of an inducer, a typical sensory response, and a concurrent experience in a different modality. So basically what that means is that an inducer, like hearing a word, for example, provides a normal sensory response of hearing and processing what you're hearing, but it simultaneously produces another sensation in a different modality, like seeing color or feeling a physical sensation that you wouldn't normally from hearing a word. So some characteristics of synesthesia are that it correlates dimensions of auditory and visual experience and other sensation modalities. It translates attributes from one sensory domain to another. And it's a way of experiencing sensations differently. So, for example, people will experience color when they hear or read a word rather than seeing the actual color on a page. So even if the text is in black, they'll be visually experiencing a different color as they're reading it. Or when somebody is talking, they'll be hearing a word in a different color. So it includes both a experiential component and a translation component. So the experiential component is the vividness of imagery or feelings that are evoked by the stimuli. So like how bright the visual experience is when they hear something and they're simultaneously seeing something. And then the translation component is the term that is used to refer to the representation or depiction of sounds and colors or other sensory domains that are experienced in another. Okay, so now I'm going to have you guys watch a video on a study that incorporates different characteristics of synesthesia and gives you the ability to kind of get a feel for how different senses are connecting to one another, which is what people who have synesthesia experience all the time. So you can go ahead and pause this video and click on the link and watch the video, and then you can come back. Okay, so hopefully you watched the video, and it just kind of gives you a taste of what synesthetes are experiencing when they're connecting senses. In this particular study, it was looking at sound and music connecting with different colors, which is kind of what a lot of people with synesthesia experience all the time. So it gives like people who don't have that similar experience, so they can get a feel for what that would be like. So yeah, so now we're going to look at some different types of synesthesia. So we have visual auditory synesthesia, which is vivid visual images that are evoked by different sounds. It's also brightness of the images, which can be determined by the pitch of a sound. So that's similar to the study that we looked at a minute ago, because one of the most common types of visual auditory synesthesia is called color hearing, where individuals are seeing specific colors when they hear different letters or words. So in this case of the study, it was reversed, where they were seeing the color and the sound was coming in as they were experiencing the color. But usually for colored hearing synesthesia, they're hearing a sound or reading a sound, and then they're seeing specific colors. So the higher the pitch might be a different color, or the brightness of the color that they're seeing might be different than if it was a lower pitch. So then we also have visual taste synesthesia, which is experiencing visual colors when eating certain types of food. So you might be experiencing one color when you're eating spicy food and another color when you're eating sweet food, which is really cool. Then we have time-space synesthesia, which is where you're experiencing time in a way where it's organized spatially. And then mirror touch synesthesia, where individuals feel like they're being touched when they see somebody else being touched, which is just really cool. So there's actually 54 main types of synesthesia, but these are the ones that people experience the most. Visual auditory synesthesia is experienced more than any other type. The time, space, and mirror touch synesthesia are experienced less than the visual ones. And colored hearing is a really common one. So the last thing that we're gonna, oh, just kidding, not the last thing. There's two things left. So we're gonna look at how people who have synesthesia describe their lives. And some ways that they've described their lives have been like, I felt like I could smell a color or see a sound or hear an odor, which is just like not something that normal people experience because it's taking a characteristic of one sense and experiencing it in another. So they also take specific group associations and can see colors that way. So each day of the week might get its own color, but it might not be because of the name of the day of the week. They just like experience the day of a week in a different color, which is super interesting. And then other people associate people's personalities with different senses, which is just crazy to think about. So yeah, the last thing is what's actually occurring in the brain of people who have synesthesia. So it basically magnifies connections that are present early in life that have been pruned and they're inhibited during development. So when synaptic pruning occurs as a young kid, if it's not fully completed between certain brain areas, that's when the different senses kind of combine during these like stimuli occurring. So it just gets kind of foggy because they were not separated during pruning. So a lot of fMRI results have indicated that during synesthetic experiences, which they call precepts, there is activation in both expected areas of the brain and the areas dealing with the additional sense being experienced. So going back to the colored hearing example, they're hearing a word, and so that's using their auditory cortex to process that. But because they're seeing color, there's activation in their visual cortex as well. Whereas in a normal human who doesn't have synesthesia, the visual cortex wouldn't be lit up or activated when somebody is just hearing a word. And it also occurs when inhibitory feedback is disinhibited, and that's allowing the primary sensory cortical areas to be activated by unexpected input from the wrong sense. So that's what's going on in the brain. That's all I have on synesthesia. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And thanks for listening.